June 5, 1944, 23:40 hours, Derby House, Western Approaches, Command, Liverpool. Telephones rattle in clipped voices, and plotting boards glow under blackout hoods. In the wireless intercept log of the Y service, a petty officer pencils a sudden rise. North Sea voice circuits have jumped from routine to busy. There is no plain language. There is no codebook victory. There are only patterns. Call signs on a German Navy communications network rotate to fresh identifiers in under 10 minutes. A shore transmitter near Helgoland flips schedule. 2 long-haul transmissions hold key down slightly longer than the operator habit recorded last week. Across the room, a young member of the Women's Royal Naval Service traces a finger along bearings that high-frequency direction. Finding stations have just sent by teleprinter from Scarborough County, Antrim and St Kilda. 3 lines cross hard, then drift along an arc. A watchkeeper says softly that you can see them moving. P1 stamp, date 5, June to 6, June 1944. Places Liverpool, Scarborough County, Antrim, St Kilda and Bletchley Park. Organisations and units: Y Service Coastal, Wireless Intercept Stations, Western Approaches, Command Government Code and Cipher School, Hut 3 and Hut 6. Commanders: Admiral Sir Max Horton, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force Commander General Dwight David Eisenhower, and Commander-in-Chief of Submarines Gross Admiral Karl Dönitz. Scope: European Theatre of Operations, Late War. Bletchley Park rejects guesswork. Hut 6 seeks crib and daily key. Hut 3 seeks product that a staff officer can signal to a commander. Tonight, however, the picture rides on a different track, reading without reading. Traffic analysis, call sign lineage charts, communications, network structure diagrams, high-frequency direction, finding bearings that become geometry, movement tables that turn a night of key clicks into a pencil line on a chart. Even when Enigma daily keys will not break in time, the plot moves, and the plot is enough to cue steel and fuel in the right direction, at the right hour. 1,000 kilometers away, a German staff officer with pale wrists and nicotine-stained fingers bends over a radio situation map at the Nachrichten section of Oberbefehlshaber West, near Saint-Germain-en-Laye. He believes that the ciphers stand. The Enigma machine is a fortress. The staff lectures said so. He has ordered short messages, clean call sign rotations, and strict schedules. He has enforced all 3. He marks Allied bomber corridors based on last night raids, and tells a colleague that the Allies must have spies in the ports. He does not understand that the pattern of his own side communications is singing louder than any decoded sentence. Midnight steps into 6 June. In the Western Approaches, convoys and invasion task groups run English Channel lanes on schedules the German staff has misread. At Derby House, Western Approaches, command watchkeepers pair their live plot with government code and cipher school cross-hatched tables, which groups of German submarines are active by circuit usage, which shore stations act as network. Control tonight, which bearings show long-haul traffic aimed toward the Pas de Calais, and which bearings show transmitters edging west. The spike on the North Sea communications network fades. A channel communications network comes alive. The call signs are new, but the transmitters belong to the same operators, and the sets sing with operator fingerprints. A Women's Royal Naval Service plotter ticks boxes for rhythm change communications, network reassignment and chatter variants. She draws a pencil line at 0112 toward the Cotentin Peninsula. In the air war, the same logic has been carving shapes for months. Royal Air Force Y Service cabins from Cheadle to Worth Matravers have mapped redeployments of Luftwaffe Gruppen, by the way call signs slide, and controllers hand off fighters. When Jagdgeschwader 26 shifted flights north in early 1944, call sign blocks and ground control timings dragged a comet tail of proof across the board before any decrypts arrived. The United States Army Air Forces learned the same way. Royal Air Force Fighter Command, and then the United States 8th Air Force, began queuing Mustang escorts to high-tier ambush. By riding tempo rather than text, a circuit grows busy. A controller cadence tightens vector language, compresses, and a scramble is on. On land, the drumbeat carries with equal force. In autumn 1944, and into winter 1944 to 1945, Allied traffic analysts map German rail lifts. By the way, Army communications networks go taut, then vanish, then reappear in another core area with the same control habits a day later. Even without a single sentence, Broken, a staff officer at Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force G-2, can place pins along a Rhine bridge by matching how communications network control rotates, how often authentication, challenges occur, and how unit headquarters keep their favorite minute marks. German staffs know radio discipline. They lecture it, they publish orders, they shorten messages, they bounce schedules, they enforce corrections again and again. A formation habit, however, is like posture. You believe you have straightened until a camera shows that you still slouch. Back to Derby House, 0230. Reports from coastal high-frequency direction. Finding huts stack up multiple bearings, steady drift from southwest to northeast, then an abrupt dogleg. The German submarine communications network that should have stayed, spread along the channel, narrows like a funnel. In the combat intelligence room, a lieutenant commander draws a box where the arcs tighten. He does not require words to route ships around that box. A signal flashes to a convoy commodore with a new time on point. An airstrike is cued for dawn along the eastern lip of the box. The weather is bad. The mathematics are good. Hut, 3 drafts, a product with careful caveats, derived from traffic analysis and high-frequency direction finding. Not a decrypt. Confidence high for movement and low for intent. Western Approaches Command accepts it. This is not faith. This is practice. The Y Service learned in 1942 and 1943 that a 3-station high-frequency direction finding fix lies less often than a captured paper that is already a few hours old. Sailors call high-frequency direction finding huff-duff as if it were a joke in a public house. But there is nothing cute about a crossfix that tells you where a commander sits, even when he says nothing intelligible at all. The German officer at Oberbefehlshaber West drinks bitter coffee and reviews a fresh radio discipline order. No unit will transmit on the hour. All call signs will rotate per table X. Maximum transmission length will be 20 seconds. He underlines every line. He feels safer. He cannot kill the rhythm. His communications network still rises before a march and falls after a march. His control stations still reveal themselves by the way the rest of the communications network orbits them. When he rotates call signs, the whole constellation slides together. The Allies do not need to know what he said. The Allies need to see that he moved. By 0500 hours, ships off Normandy turn on the line the plot predicted. On the beachheads, soldiers will remember noise, smoke, shingle, and machine gun fire. In the rooms that cued those men to the sand at the right hour, the lasting memory will be pencil, paper, and a shape that crept across a chart faster than any decrypt could. June 6, 1944, 0620 hours, Saint-Germain-en-Laye headquarters of Oberbefehlshaber West. The corridors thrum with staff shoes and typewriter hammers. A signals officer in the Nachrichten section lays a straight edge across a radio situation plot and persuades himself that the network is quiet. He has issued the orders, short messages, rotating call signs, strict schedules. He believes that a cipher is a fortress and that silence is a moat. He studies the paper and hears only the comfort of doctrine. Across the channel there is only practice. Government Code and Cipher School, Bletchley Park, has huts that prefer solved keys, but this morning the duty is different. Hut 6 seeks crib and daily key. Time is short. Hut 3 shapes product that a commander can act upon. Western Approaches Command at Derby House in Liverpool and the coastal wireless intercept sites of the Y Service treat habit as message and geometry as meaning. High-frequency direction. Finding bearings from Scarborough County, Antrim, and St Kilda arrive by teleprinter in clipped lines that turn the air into triangles and the triangles into motion. Call sign, lineage charts, network structure diagrams, and movement tables fuse into a picture that is not words and not silence, but something more dangerous than both. 0634 hours. A compilation reaches Western Approaches Command from coastal high-frequency direction finding huts. 3 independent fixes on a long-haul German transmission intersect northwest of Cherbourg. The same transmitter was fixed 2 hours earlier, west of Le Havre. The fix points advance along a slow curve that matches the behavior of a headquarters link, not a single submarine. The call signs on that long-haul circuit are fresh per the change table, but the signature remains operator, keying length, repeated micro-pauses, and control timing that is a habit as distinct as a voice. The text of the signals is unread, but the behavior of the network is loud. The plot says that the German staff that owns this circuit is shifting its center of gravity toward the Cotentin Peninsula. Royal Air Force Y service cabins in southern England add the same music in a different register. Worth Matrever's logs ground control speech that tightens into clipped vectors and overwatch phrases. The encrypted mission orders remain opaque, but cadence is a metronome that commanders have learned to use. When Jagdgeschwader 2 and Jagdgeschwader 26 surge fighters toward the Norman coast, the controller cadence compresses handoffs accelerate, and the silence between controller bursts halves. Royal Air Force Fighter Command learned that pattern through the winter. The United States 8th Air Force learned it by escorting deep and fighting long. By early 1944, Mustang escorts were already riding that rise and fall to choose tier altitude and point of intercept. This morning, the same rise and fall tells Allied controllers when German fighters leave holding orbits and when they turn down sun to rake the invasion lanes. On land, the metadata paints rail, steel, and staff displacement with the same stubborn clarity. Officers at Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force G-2 study tables that contain not a single decrypted sentence and yet place pins with confidence. They track how a core staff changing location causes its field telephone relays to flare on radio, fall quiet while lines bed in, then resume with a longer and steadier tone as rear services close. They measure how often authentication challenges occur on a given Army network across a 24-hour period and how that frequency spikes with the stress of movement. They watch which headquarters positions itself as network control and which subordinate headquarters answer, and how that pattern flickers when a formation detaches a camp group for a counterattack. In autumn 1944 and into winter 1944 to 1945, this discipline will routinely expose German rail lifts before a reconnaissance pilot photographs a train. The discipline is already at work now on the morning of the landing. The signals officer at Saint-Germain-en-Laye believes that he has killed the leak by killing the message. He signs a fresh order. No unit will transmit within the first and last 5 minutes of any hour. All call signs will rotate per the table at the half hour. Maximum transmission length will remain 20 seconds. He has in his mind shut the windows. He has not turned off the house lights. The network still brightens when staffs prepare to move. The network still dims when formations halt. Network control stations still sit like suns, with subordinate stations circling them in obedient arcs. The Allied picture is not a transcript. The Allied picture is a star chart. 07:15 hours. Western approaches. Command issues a diversion to a fast convoy approaching the eastern approach lanes. The order rests on a box drawn where converging high-frequency direction, finding arcs tightened, and on a traffic spike that rose and then steadied along a channel circuit that usually breathes at night. Royal Air Force Coastal Command aircrews receive a dawn strike cue that lays a search line along the eastern edge of that box, a belt of probability sharp enough to waste no fuel. The words on the signal are simple: proceed. The foundation of the decision is complex movement, plotted from habit bearings that ignore lies, and tempo that reveals intent without a single noun. By 0800 hours, the signals officer steps from the map to the window. Tanks, staff, cars, and telephone cable drums growl through the park outside the headquarters. He believes that harder discipline will starve the Allied picture. He does not see that his insistence on synchronized order makes the constellation slide in unison, and therefore betrays its shared identity more clearly. When he forces his network to rotate call signs together, the shared movement is visible across multiple circuits at once. When he imposes rigid time, rules, spikes, and troughs align across widely separated stations and betray the tempo of march and halt. The fortress stands. The moat is deep. The blackout curtains glow because the lamps remain on. On the beaches, naval gunfire lifts and infantry sections move. In the rooms that brought those ships and aircraft to the right lanes at the right hours, watchkeepers pin fresh bearings, smooth new pencil lines, and trust the shape that repetition draws. By late war, Allied commanders have learned to cue convoys, airstrikes, and ground maneuvers from these plots when ultra-code-breaking lags. German radio discipline fixes rarely erase the patterns. The patterns shift like a river that moves its channel and yet still reveals the slope of the land. June 6, 1944, 09:10 hours. Derby House, Western Approaches Command, Liverpool. The day plot overlays the night plot and the pencils have not cooled. A watchkeeper lifts a transparent sheet and lays it across the channel approaches. High-frequency direction. Finding arcs from Scarborough County, Antrim and St Kilda now meet fresh fixes from Malin Head and Goonhavern. The intersections are not perfect, but they lean the same way the pre-dawn traffic spike leaned. A staff officer shades a narrow quadrilateral on the overlay and writes a time window along its upper edge. The shape is not a boast. The shape is a hypothesis that ships and aircraft will test. Across the water at Saint-Germain-en-Laye, the signals officer of Oberbefehlshaber West drafts another discipline order. Rigid silence during displacement, short bursts on arrival and immediate transfer to landline the moment cable can be seated. He believes that he has reduced the signature of motion. He has given it a rhythm. Government code and cipher school analysts and Y-service watchkeepers read that rhythm the way an artilleryman reads a ranging fall. 1, 2, 3. Now the battery is ready. 09:30 hours. A Royal Air Force Coastal Command liaison officer steps into the Western Approaches Combat Intelligence Room with a folder from No. 19 Group. The folder holds a strip map for a dawn to mid-morning search belt that ran along the eastern face of the shaded corridor. One crew reported a faint radar mast return that rose, dipped and vanished in sea clutter. No attack. No confirmation. The report matters for the geometry more than for the contact. Bearings, call sign lineage and operator cadence had outlined a funnel. A patrol line brushed one lip and felt movement. Over the channel, a fast convoy alters course and small speed by signal. The Commodore has a bearing a window and a terse instruction. He does not have a translated German order. He does not require one. The United States Navy escort commander, riding herd on the screen, carries two small notebooks. One lists high-frequency direction, finding fixes that proved true. The other lists the times the method missed. The weight of the first notebook keeps his hand steady on a dull morning. He holds formation tight, keeps speed constant, and refuses the nervous urge to hurry. Geometry will not be improved by anxiety. Worth Matravers adds its own line to the picture. The Royal Air Force operator there has logged the same ground controller since winter through shifts of call signs and weather. The controller cadence snaps, tight handoffs quicken and silences shrink. The operator draws an arrow on his log and writes probable down-sun approach and probable exit to Seine Bay. At Royal Air Force Fighter Command and at the 8th Air Force controller desk, that arrow does not become a speech about enemy thought. It becomes altitude tiers and patrol legs laid to cross the likely path. Escorts have been doing this since early spring. They do it again. 10:20 hours. Western Approaches receives a strong short fix from St Kilda on the long-haul German circuit that showed west of Le Havre before dawn and north of the Cotentin Peninsula in mid-morning. The same operator signature rides the transmission, the 5-second micro-pause, the breath-long overrun beyond the cut-off click and the tight spacing of control acknowledgements. Call signs have rolled forward per table. The constellation has slid. It is still the same constellation. The lieutenant commander with the overlay does not claim to know the message content. He writes 4 block words along the corridor's lower edge. Move. Expected by noon. Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force G-2 pencils its own overlays. Officers there do not wait for a perfect sentence to draw an arrow. They match authentication challenge frequency on a German army network to rail movement tables compiled from aerial reconnaissance, captured schedules and station counts. They note that a core network, which sat quiet for 2 days, now emits identical time checks at measured quarter hours. The habit belongs to a staff that likes to synchronize subordinate headquarters with metronomic precision before displacement. It has been observed since spring. The staff puts the habit onto the day estimate without theatrics. Measurement not flourish. 11:05 hours. The shaded corridor earns a test. A destroyer on the convoy flank lifts an underwater contact that is too clean for a shoal and too steady for a broken layer echo. Depth charges tumble. The sea lifts and then settles to a thin oil smear. The report rides a wire to Derby House and to number 19 group. In the combat intelligence room, there is no speech about victory. There is a pencil tick beside a bearing and a line in the margin that says, "The corridor was drawn in the right place at the right time by transmitted energy measured at long distance." 11:40 hours. Saint-Germain-en-Laye. The signals officer reads a subordinate summary that points in the wrong direction. Allied ships and aircraft, the note says, continue to appear where they should not have had time to appear. The officer mutters about spies in the ports and traitors in the rail offices. He dictates a further order, shorter transmissions, faster call sign rotations, and simultaneous net checks across multiple circuits. He thinks friction will blur the enemy plot. Coordinated friction is a signature. When every net twitches at the same minute, Allied operators learn the minute and mark it as a clock tick. Noon settles onto Normandy. Naval gunfire shifts by table. Beachmasters move stacks of ammunition and gasoline can by schedule that was calculated before midnight and corrected against morning bearings. The men at the waterline do not see the corridor that was shaded in Liverpool. They do not need to. The practice exists to make their work possible at acceptable loss. 12:10 hours. The overlay is lifted and replaced. New arcs creep across the glass as fresh bearings come in. Call sign lineage rolls one table forward. Transmission habits persist like fingerprints. The map breathes. The plot breathes with it. The procedure remains the same: measure, shade, cue, and move. June 6, 1944. 13:20 hours. Derby House Western approaches command Liverpool. The room smells of graphite and hot valves. The morning overlay has been logged and filed. A fresh transparent sheet lies under glass. Teleprinters beat out high-frequency direction, finding summaries from Scarborough County, Antrim, St Kilda, Marlin Head and Goonhaven. New arcs lean a little farther north and a little farther east away from the noon corridor that cost the enemy a contact and cost the convoy nothing. A watchkeeper shades a slimmer shape and prints a new time window on its rim. No applause, only the discipline that follows measurement. 13:40 hours. A liaison from Royal Air Force Coastal Command No. 19 Group brings an update. Patrol crews have flown the belt along the eastern face of the earlier shape and have extended the belt by one grid to fit the new geometry. One crew reports a radar spike that rose and fell as if a mast brushed the clutter. Another crew reports only whitecaps and wind. In the combat intelligence room, a staff officer tilts the overlay under the lamp. The reports are not decoration. They say the triangles match the weather and the sea well enough to warrant a second pass. Across the water at Saint-Germain-en-Laye. 1400 hours. The signals officer at Oberbefehlshaber West signs another radio discipline order. All call signs will rotate on the quarter hour. No burst will exceed 15 seconds. Long-haul traffic will be handed to landline as soon as cable is seated. He believes that synchronized brevity will smear the Allied picture. To the Y-service huts, the synchronized twitch is a clean pulse. At 14:15 hours, operators from the north of Scotland to the south of England note the same net hiccup at the same second. The pulse becomes a tick on the Allied wall clock. The tick makes the next stack of fixes easier to agree. 14:50 hours. Worthma Travers, the Royal Air Force Y-service operator who has tracked the same ground controller since winter, adds a line that is neither decrypt nor guess. Controller cadence has shortened. Handoffs are closer. Exits are trending toward Seine Bay. At Royal Air Force Fighter Command and at the 8th Air Force Escort Desk, those notes do not become an essay about intent. They become altitude tiers and patrol legs designed to cross a likely path. The escorts have done this since early spring. They do it again. 15:10 hours. Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force G-2. Staff under Major General Kenneth Strong review a rail lift estimate that contains not a single German noun and is nonetheless sharp. Authentication challenge frequency on an army network rises with the day and falls almost flat at night, the inverse of its usual habit. A core network that acted as sun to a ring of subordinates in May now answers as a planet on two circuits whose children sit farther west. Pins move a little on the map. Not prophecy. Measurement. 16.5 hours. Derby House. St Kilda prints a short, strong fix on the same long-haul German circuit logged west of Le Havre before dawn and north of the Cotentin Peninsula in mid-morning. The operator signature has not changed a micro-pause near the 5th second, a breath-long overrun, and an unwavering rhythm in control acknowledgements. Call signs have rolled per table. The constellation has slid. It remains the same constellation. The lieutenant commander adjusts the afternoon window, and a single sentence goes to the convoy commodore: maintain measured course and time. 17:12 hours. In the channel, a destroyer boxes the new shaded edge and lifts a contact that is too straight for a fish and too patient for a broken layer echo. Depth charges roll. The sea lifts and then oils in a thin smear. Reports run to Derby House and to number 19 group. There is no speech about victory. There is a pencil cross a time and a note that says, "Geometry put steel where steel had a chance." 18:20 hours. Saint-Germain-en-Laye. The signals officer reads a summary that tightens his jaw. Allied ships and aircraft keep arriving on the edges of German movement in ways that do not match reconnaissance or the expected lag of code breaking. He blames spies in ports and traitors in rail offices. He dictates another order: shorter bursts, faster rotations, simultaneous checks across 4 circuits. Coordinated friction remains a signature. When every net twitches together, Allied operators mark the minute and ride it like a pendulum. 19:30 hours. Bletchley Park Hut 3. A duty officer drafts the late war paragraph commanders have learned to use, derived from traffic analysis and high-frequency direction finding. Not a decrypt. Confidence high for movement, confidence low for intent. Suggested actions hold convoy timing as signaled. Retain coastal command belt as adjusted. Expect renewed fighter control cadence with shortened interburst silence. In 1941, such a paragraph would have felt thin. In mid-1944, it is a tool. 21:10 hours. Derby House. The night watch takes stations. A Women's Royal Naval Service plotter draws her ruler across fresh arcs as 2 fixes bite within a minute along the afternoon corridor. She draws a smaller box, writes the hour and minute on its edge, and the western approaches staff officer signs the corner with the 2 words that are permitted because they are measured ACT now. On the beaches, naval gunfire schedules turn pages. Inland engineers lay cable and bulldozers nose through hedgerow banks. None of them will ever see the overlays, movement tables or cadence logs filed in Liverpool and Buckinghamshire. They do not need to. The practice that joins those files exists to make danger a little thinner and opportunity a little thicker. The German officer has written many orders and believes that doctrine has dimmed the room. From the Allied side of the glass, the house still breathes. December 14, 1944, 21:10 hours. Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force G-2 Versailles. The windows sweat cold. Major General Kenneth Strong and staff bend over overlays and daily movement tables. A clerk pins a fresh sheet that shows rail lift capacity into Eiffel and Ardennes railheads across 10 days. The columns are steady. Another clerk tacks up a summary from Royal Air Force and Royal Navy Wireless Intercept Y service huts. Several German Army command networks that chatter lightly most evenings have gone abnormally quiet, not dead, quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when staffs are on field telephones and dispatch riders, while radio speaks only to keep the network alive. Across the room, a captain rubs his knuckles over a paragraph that mirrors summer practice at sea. Authentication challenge frequency on a German Army network has risen during daylight and fallen to near 0 at night, the inverse of its usual rhythm. He circles the line. He does not write the word offensive. He writes a question mark and the word movement. December 15, 1944. 07:30 hours. 1st United States Army G-2 SPA. Intelligence summaries pile on a table that smells of wet canvas and coffee. Signals intelligence officers read their wireless intercept digests against aerial reconnaissance that shows rail yards blurred by snow and steam. The digests say that network control stations for 2 German corps have held answering roles for 48 hours, while subordinate stations flash short time checks and then fall out again. That pattern has preceded short displacements before. The summary does not predict an axis. It does not need to. A staff officer draws a thin arrow from the Schnee Eifel toward the Amblave in pencil only. Caution, not prophecy. December 15, 1944. 12:40 hours. 3rd United States Army G-2 Luxembourg. Colonel Oscar Koch reads a synthesis of truck counts, prisoner interrogations, and signals traffic habits. He has warned for days that German forces are concentrating for a blow. The day's wireless intercept note tells him that a handful of army networks have switched to unusually rigid schedule blocks that ride quarter hours across multiple circuits at once. Oscar Koch has seen that pulse used to keep dispersed units in step just before movement. He carries the synthesis to Lieutenant General George Smith Patton Jr. George Smith Patton Jr. nods and keeps his own staff on a short tether for an eastward turn he hopes he will not need to make. The paper that convinced him does not contain a single decrypted German sentence. December 16, 1944. 04:30 hours. The Ardennes front. Artillery wakes the dark and turns the snow into powdered smoke. Where signals officers can hear German radio at all, they hear clocks. Short bursts at minute marks that match the new rigid schedules. The rest is landline and runner. The Allied picture does not prevent the blow, but the picture strips mystery from its shape by the first hours. As the German offensive pushes west, the same radio discipline that was meant to deny a signature creates one networks brighten when staffs move, networks dim when staffs halt. Network control stations pull subordinates like planets. December 16, 1944, 10:50 hours. Wireless intercept hut worth Matravers. A Royal Air Force operator logs a Luftwaffe ground controller whose cadence he has known since the spring. The call signs are new, but the voice habit is the same. Controller bursts tighten and handoffs shorten. The log says that fighters are hunting road columns under low cloud. The log does not speak about intent. The log speaks about tempo. 8th Air Force and 9th Air Force controllers read the tempo and lay patrol legs where vectors will likely cut across retreat routes. Fog, snow, and ground fire take their price. Bearings and cadence shave minutes from the price. December 17, 1944. 13:15 hours. Western approaches. Command, Liverpool. The Atlantic is winter black, but the method that guarded convoys in June is still on the boards in December. German long-haul naval circuits that tend to sleep through daylight begin to twitch at noon and at dusk as submarines reposition to exploit the storms. High-frequency direction. Finding arcs from Scarborough County, Antrim, St Kilda, and Malin Head show a shuffle west of the Bay of Biscay. The rectangles that the staff draw for convoys are smaller in winter and the margins are thinner, but the rectangles still cost the enemy contacts and still save merchant hulls that carry fuel and artillery shell for the Ardennes fight. December 18, 1944. 18:40 hours. Saint-Germain-en-Laye Oberbefehlshaber West. The German signals officer reads situation reports that describe Allied aircraft and artillery arriving where they should not arrive. He blames ground spies. He blames captured documents. He punches out a radio discipline order that shortens transmissions, rotates call signs twice as often, and forces simultaneous network checks across 4 army circuits. He believes that simultaneity will smear Allied plots. The order gives Allied wireless intercept operators a metronome that runs across multiple networks at once. Government code and cipher school hut. 3 posts. A product that reads like a page from June, derived from traffic analysis, and high-frequency direction, finding not a decrypt. Confidence high for movement, confidence low for intent. Suggested action hold reserves against an axis that matches rail lift network cadence and the new synchronized checks. December 1944. 11:20 hours. Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. The countermeasure is not dramatic. The countermeasure is a staff graph. The graph matches four measurements: rail lift toward the hour the authentication challenge frequency on a German army network, in the same window the appearance of a known network control signature, one echelon higher than last week, and a pause that appears every time a corps staff plants landlines. The pause is a trough in radio volume. The trough repeats. The trough is a road sign that says, wait 1 hour, then expect movement again. Reserves are shifted accordingly. The German advance continues. The German staff that ordered tighter rules believes that it has turned the radio landscape into a desert of silence. The Allied picture shows a desert with a river under the sand. December 23, 1944, 5:30 local time. The sky over the Ardennes clears. Allied aircraft go up. Ground and air fight on terms no longer set only by weather and surprise. The men at roadblocks and in gun pits will remember fog lifting engines, warming, and the hard shock of armour on narrow roads. In the rooms that tuned the first days of reaction, what remains on paper is a set of tables, arcs, and cadence logs that did not predict a doctrine, but did turn confusion into geometry quickly enough to matter. By late war, the method has a rhythm officers trust. Read the movement of networks when the words stay dark. Watch the bearings bite. Build movement tables that show habit as clearly as any typed order. Cue ships, aircraft, and reserves from a plot built from silence. The German officer who wrote 4 discipline orders in June and 5 in December believes that he has worn the enemy ears out. He has taught those ears to count. January 2019-45. 06, 10 hours. Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force G-2 Versailles. The wall of overlays has lost its summer dust and gained winter fingerprints. A clerk tacks up a new cadence sheet from Royal Air Force and Royal Navy wireless intercept huts. Several German army networks now show the same narrow beam habit seen before: short displacements in the autumn, brief authentication challenges bunched at quarter hours, then troughs while landlines carry the weight. The staff officer who draws arrows does not write prophecy. He writes 2 thin lines toward the Lower Rhine and waits for rail counts to agree. February 7, 1945. 21:40 hours. 1st Canadian Army G-2 Nijmegen. Rain taps canvas over the mapboards. Intelligence officers preparing for Operation Veritable pair aerial photographs of the Reichswald with a Y-service digest that lists which German corps networks have hardened their timing discipline. The digest notes that a net believed to belong to 15th Army has shifted its control habit 1 echelon higher and farther east, while subordinate stations answer in shorter bursts. The words remain unread. The behaviour is plain. Pins creep toward Cleve without flourish. The offensive will open tomorrow. The habit has already put some of the enemy's weight where the mud is deepest. February 8, 1945. 05:30 hours. Western approaches command Liverpool. The Atlantic breathes under slate cloud. High-frequency direction. Finding arcs from Scarborough County, Antrim, St Kilda, Malinhead and Goonhaven, close like hinges west of the Bay of Biscay. Long-haul German naval circuits that slept through daylight in summer now twitch at noon and dusk as submarines with snorkels reposition for winter weather. A rectangle goes down for a southbound convoy that will feed the Rhineland fight. The convoy never knows the rectangle existed. The rectangle does its work anyway. February 12, 1945, 14:20 hours. Oberbefehlshaber West Signals Section. The German officer who believes in the fortress of cipher signs a fresh order, quarter-hour rotations, across multiple army nets, no message beyond 15 seconds, and immediate shift to landline as soon as cable can be seated. He thinks simultaneity will smear plots. To government code and cipher school and to the Y-service huts, simultaneity is a pulse. At 14:15 hours, operators from the north of Scotland to the south of England log the same twitch on separate circuits. The pulse becomes a tick on the Allied wall clock. The tick makes the next stack of fixes easier to agree. February 23, 1945. 11:10 hours. Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force G-2. Major General Kenneth Strong's staff lays a graph on the table. 4 measurements share one slope, rail lift toward Wesel, a rise of daytime authentication challenges on an army network that serves that sector. A known network control signature now, answering 1 echelon higher than last week, and a time soak, repeating trough in radio volume when staffs lay cable. The trough reappears every time a corps pauses to plant lines. The trough is a road sign that says, "Wait, then expect movement." The map absorbs the sign. Reserves shift a little west and a little north along river roads that will matter in March. March 10, 1945, 10:30 hours. Oberbefehlshaber West changes hands. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt departs. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring takes command. The change does not change the picture that Allied operators see. New signatures appear on a handful of circuits as staff officers move desks, but the habits remain. Networks brighten before movement, dim after movement, and reveal hierarchy. By the way, subordinates orbit a control station. The Allied chart is not a transcript. The Allied chart is a star field that barely notices a new astronomer at the eyepiece. March 23, 1945, 22:40 hours, near the Rhine west of Wesel. 21st Army Group under Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery finishes marking lanes for Operation Plunder. Signals officers at British 2nd Army and United States 9th Army read their late packets from Government Code and Cipher School and from Royal Air Force and Royal Navy wireless intercept huts. The packets are late war paragraphs commanders have learned to use, derived from traffic analysis and high-frequency direction. Finding, not a decrypt. Confidence high for movement, confidence low for intent. Suggested action: hold bridging columns on present timing, expect counter-movement cadence along the Lower Rhine to spike just before dawn. The packets do not claim to read a German sentence. They claim to measure a German heartbeat. March 24, 1945, 04:30 hours. Wesel glows under artillery. Operation Varsity lifts into the sky. Transport aircraft and gliders crawl east under a cloud of fighter cover. In the hours that bracket the lift, Royal Air Force and United States Army Air Forces controllers watch the same ground control cadence from Luftwaffe stations they have watched since winter. Bursts shrink, handoffs tighten and exits. Trend toward the Lippe. The controllers do not announce enemy intention. They set altitude tiers and patrol legs to cross the likely path. The airlift goes in hard. It also goes in where the pattern said it could arrive with the least surprise left. March 24, 1945, 14:10 hours. Western approaches Liverpool. Teleprinters still beat out bearings that matter to ships no one will sing about. Another rectangle slides into place for a homebound convoy that will carry wounded men and empty trucks to be refilled. The rectangle owes its shape to the same quiet music that has scored the winter call sign, lineage operator fingerprints, and a pulse that runs across nets when a commander forces discipline at the same minute on too many circuits at Cund. Once. The rectangle shaves a risk. Most of its passengers never know they ran. Night folds over the river the way it folded over the beaches in June. In the forward areas, engineers stack bridging gear. Infantrymen lean on rifles. Staff cars carry officers who believe that doctrine and courage got them across. In the rooms that cued some of the timing, the memory will be paper and pencil and a shape that moved over a chart faster than any decrypt could. The German officer who mocked the miracle of code breaking still believes that Enigma saved him more often than it betrayed him. He is right about the machine. He is wrong about the story. The story is the plot without words. April 29, 1945, 10:15 hours. Saint-Germain-en-Laye Oberbefehlshaber West Signals Section. The German officer who trusted cipher and silence stands over a table bare of comfortable answers. Headquarters has shifted again. Field telephones hum on reels through doorways. The radio situation plot shows fewer stations than it did in winter, but the habits that remained through snow remain through collapse. Nets still brighten before movement and dim after movement. The constellation still slides together when call signs rotate by table. The officer runs a knuckle down the edge of a ruler and feels a thought he has avoided since June. The enemy did not require the words. The enemy required the rhythm. Across the Channel Government Code and Cipher School, keeps writing the same late-war paragraph that commanders have learned to use without romance, derived from traffic analysis and high-frequency direction finding. Not a decrypt. Confidence high for movement, confidence low for intent. Suggested action: Q ships, Q aircraft, Q reserves at these times and along these lanes. Western approaches command. Still shades rectangles for convoys that move fuel food and wounded across seas that have become less murderous, not safe. Royal Air Force and Royal Navy Y-service huts still write cadence logs that pair controller habits to likely vectors. Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force G-2 still stacks rails, nets bearings and pauses into overlays that suggest where weight will drift next. The war has passed its turning points, but the practice has not gone stale. Measurement does not go stale. May 2, 1945, 1540 hours. Hamburg radio traffic thins to a whisper, then to the peculiar tremor that comes when officers try to end a network without admitting that it is ending. At Worth-Matravers, a wireless intercept operator who has been on the same watch cycle since 1944, hears a ground controller he has logged for a year drawl, a final burst with an old cadence. The words mean nothing. The habit means everything. The operator writes a last arrow for a last vector that will likely never launch. He signs the page, files it to a drawer that will be opened by historians, and steps outside into salt air that smells like peacetime weather, even when peace is not yet paper. May 7, 1945, 11:20 hours. Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force Reims. Staff officers stand in corridors as signatures creep towards surrender. In a side room, a captain closes a folder labeled Movement Tables Army Group, March to May. The folder contains no German nouns, no triumph, and no myth. It contains rail counts, authentication, challenge frequencies, net control fingerprints, and the repeating troughs that mark the hours when staffs lay cable and the minutes when staffs pull cable up. A major who learned the method in 1942 and trusted it in 1944 taps the folder and says that these were the shapes under the words. He does not say that these shapes won the war. He says that these shapes put steel and fuel where commanders could try to win battles with less blindness. The German officer reads the first Allied newspaper smuggled into his building 2 days after. He snorts at the headline that says that miracle codebreakers decided everything. He knows that Enigma stood more often than it fell. He also knows now that the other truth is larger than he wanted it to be. He remembers June 6 at 06:34 hours, when a long-haul transmitter that he believed was a whisper became a beacon to distant ears because the operator held a key down a breath too long on every 5th second. He remembers December 16 at 04:30 hours, when his synchronized quarter-hour net checks became a metronome that ran across 4 circuits and gave the enemy a wall clock. He remembers February 12 at 14:15 hours, when he tried to smear plots with simultaneity and instead taught Allied huts to count his pulses. Doctrine had been a fortress. Silence had been a moat. The lamps in every room had still shone through the blackout curtains. There are names he will mutter for the rest of his life with a respectful bitterness. Scarborough, County Antrim, St Kilda, Malin Head, Goonhaven, Bletchley Park, Derby House, Worth-Matravers. He never met the Women's Royal Naval Service plotter who shaded a rectangle that saved a convoy by a few miles and a few minutes. He never shook the hand of the Royal Air Force operator who could tell a ground controller by the length of a pause between clipped vectors. He never saw the Western approaches Lieutenant Commander print move expected by noon on an overlay built only from numbers, habit, and geometry. He does not need to. He can see the shape they saw, because at last he allows himself to see the shape that he made. On the Allied side, there is no appetite for miracle language in the after-action write-ups that matter. The internal memoranda speak in the same dry sentences that filled Hut 3 products and Western approaches signals, derived from traffic analysis and high-frequency direction. Finding. Not a decrypt. Confidence statements attached. Movement tables appended. Recommendations attached. The admirals and generals who relied on these papers in 1944 and 1945 do not need them to become legend. They needed them to be right often enough to protect convoys, to steer fighters into corridors with more opportunity than surprise, and to place reserves across rivers on the night that mattered. In the museums that will follow, visitors will stare at cipher machines inside glass and imagine that a secret was either a lock or a key. Somewhere in a quieter corner, a faded plotting sheet will show arcs, ticks, shaded boxes, and a penciled hour. The sheet looks like logistics. It is logistics. It also tells the story that the German officer finally understood. You can read a war without reading its words, if you are patient enough to count its footsteps. You can watch formations move by the way their nerves brighten. You can watch intent blur into probability that is sharp enough for a convoy to live and for an airlift to arrive. The German officer closes his eyes in a room that is about to be handed over to men with different badges. He had mocked the miracle. He had bet on fortress and moat. The fortress stood often. The moat ran deep. The plot without words ran deeper. He does not salute the enemy. He does not excuse himself. He acknowledges the shape he could not bring himself to see. That acknowledgement is not a confession. It is a correction entered too late to matter for his side, and exactly in time to finish the story on the other.